Okay, so equivalent fraction model's done. Now we're going to do equivalent fractions on the number line. Now we've already used number lines to show fractions before, right? If you've got 0 and 1, then you can divide that up into a certain number of equal steps, and that will be another representation of fractions instead of objects. So we're going to go ahead and do that. Only 4 questions this time. Which number shows the equivalent to 1/2? So it needs to be, literally halfway between 0 and 1. So that looks like M to me. And it says choose one answer, so we're good. Use the number line to find a fraction that is equivalent to 1/4. So we have 1/4 here, but the problem is telling us that this is cut into 12ths. And we could count that all the way up to verify if we wanted to, but I'm not gonna. So we actually have 1/12, 2/12, 3/12. That was a bit hard to say, but we have 3/12 is the equivalent to 1/4. So we're trying to get lots of different reasons for this being true. We don't just want to tell people you have to find a common denominator. That's not what this is about. This is about recognizing that fractions are inherently dividable. And they are literally division, right? So 1/4 is the same thing as 3/12. We want to get to 4/8, which is the same thing as 2/4. And then let's see, 2/3. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4. I do believe 4/6 is the correct answer. This looks like halfway, and this looks like more than 2/3. Lots and lots of different ways of looking at mathematical ideas make those mathematical ideas easier to understand, because different people will latch on to different ways of understanding things. And then once you've got one way that helps you understand, you can use that to understand the other explanations as well. It's literally how I learned to be a teacher. Equivalent fractions. Oh no, oh God. This is the first time, I think, in this stream that we have used a letter for a variable. Again, I do have a video for this over on my YouTube channel, which you can find at professor-cunningham.com and click on my face. However, there are a couple of things to keep in mind here. This isn't new. Up until this point, we have been using things like stars. That's a terrible star, but you get my drift. We've been using things like question marks or blank spaces, okay? The reason we start using letters is specifically because it's a set of convenient symbols that everyone knows. We could have come up with entirely new, completely different arcane symbols and just made something up out of nothing, but it would have been a lot more difficult to propagate those symbols. So we use letters just to stand for a number that I don't know yet. K is a number I don't know yet. Later on, like in high school, we will expand that definition to also mean a number that can change depending on circumstances. But for right now, all K means is that number that I don't know yet. The reason that we use K is because writing a number that I don't know yet over and over and over again is super inefficient. So we want to know if I have, and I'm going to do this one visually, because I have, let's go with a rectangle, and we will cut it into thirds roughly, okay? And I'm going to shade in 2 of them. There's one. I'll even make it the outside too. All right? So now I need to know, what do I have to do to these blocks in order to get 4 things instead of 2 things. Remember, the numerator numerates, it counts. It is telling us how many things there are. Right now, we have 2 things. We want to have 4 things. What do we have to do? Cut each thing in half. And if you're cutting things in half, you got to cut them all in half because the shape has to have all equivalent same size pieces. Well, now how many pieces do we have? We have 4 things. How many total pieces do we have? I count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So purely visually, without really doing any calculation, we get that 2/3 is equivalent to 4/6. I'm actually going to pause for a moment and check in with chat to see if anyone has any questions on that. Because we're kind of waist deep in it now. We've talked about numerators, we've talked about denominators, we've talked about cutting fractions into smaller fractions, which makes them more numerous, right? 2/4 is the same thing as 4/8 and all of that. And we're just sort of shoehorning in, and I'm actually kind of disappointed in Khan Academy that this is the first time we're seeing it without it being explained explicitly at some point that we use letters in place of numbers. But maybe they felt like they didn't have to because they've been doing that progression of using blank spaces and symbols up to this point. Does anybody have any questions on anything that we've been talking about up to this point? I'm actually gonna pause for just a moment in case anybody has anything they want to ask. All right, just checking. Fractions, I know, are stressful, and that's why I'm going to be slowing down and trying to check in more often. Okay, so that's k equals 6. Let's move on. Which of the following fractions is equivalent to 6/8? Now I will go ahead and give you another clue. Instead of doubling things, right, I'm allowed to double the number of things so long as I make each of them half as big. It's the same deal here. I can cut both the top and the bottom in half, and instead of 6/8, I get 3/4. And again, if you're not sure, you can always draw it out if you have to. Same deal, 3/6 equals 4 over what? Well, 3/6 is the same thing as a half. I could, if I didn't know that, if I didn't know that this 3/6 is 1/2, I could get really confused really fast. I could start thinking about cross-multiplying or whatever I learned when I was in high school, and I would get really confused and I'd go off on a tangent and I'd have no idea where I was. But instead, I'm going to remember that I don't have to directly compare that 3/6 and that 4 over whatever. I remember that 3/6, it's the same thing as 1/2, which means that this is the same thing as 4/8. And then same deal, 2/4 is the same as 4/8. It's also the same as 1/2. Boom, done and done. And done. Where are we at? Looks like we are at quiz 2, and then we will have the unit test for equivalent fractions. All right, so this is a quiz, so I'm going to kind of burn through it really quick. 2/6 is what we're looking for, which is the same thing as 1/3, 1/3, 1/3. That looks like 2/4 or a half to me, so that's wrong. That would be 2/6 is the same thing as 1/3. I actually had to check myself for a second. Let's see. We want to find something that's equivalent to 4/3. That would be 8/6. 2/3 is the same thing as 4/6. You see how we're getting the same problems over and over and over again? That's because at the 3rd grade level, we're not expecting students to be able to deal with cutting a hole into like 50 pieces. That's silly. So you're going to see a lot of the same kind of problems over and over and over again. 2/6 is the same thing as 1/3. Thank you.